shadows in the fog. London. The year was 1888. The gas lamps flickered dimly along the cobblestone streets, their pale light swallowed by a thick blanket of fog that rolled over the River Thames like a living ghost. The distant clatter of horse hooves echoed through the night, but even that sound seemed nervous, like the city itself was holding its breath. London was alive, but afraid, because somewhere in the endless maze of narrow alleys and decaying buildings, a killer was watching. It began quietly. The city was used to crime. Thieves, drunkards, pickpockets, and gangs roamed the East End freely. But this was different. What started as whispers in taverns soon became screams in the streets. Women were vanishing, poor, forgotten souls from Whitechapel, the kind of people society refused to see. And when they were found, it was too late. Their bodies, mutilated beyond imagination, told a story written in blood, a story that had no name until the newspapers gave it one. The Whitechapel murders. But behind the newspaper headlines, behind the panic and the hysteria, there were secrets, hidden within police files, coded messages, and dark alleyways where truth was traded for silence. These were the Dark London Files, and they spoke of more than just one killer. They hinted at a conspiracy, one that reached far beyond the streets of Whitechapel, into the drawing rooms of the powerful. On the night of August 31st, 1888, the first of those files began to take shape. A constable, on his usual beat, stumbled upon a sight that froze his blood. Under a flickering street lamp lay the body of Marianne Nichols, her throat cut so deep that her head was nearly severed. Her lifeless eyes stared into the fog as if still searching for mercy in a city that had none to give. The police arrived swiftly, but confusion followed. There were no witnesses, no sounds of struggle, and no footprints. Only blood, silence, and the faint smell of cheap gin. The detective scribbled notes by the weak glow of a lantern, not realizing he was opening the first chapter of London's darkest tale. The following days brought no rest. Another woman, another murder, each more gruesome than the last. The press went wild. "A monster stalks the streets of London," screamed one headline. Another called him the Phantom Butcher. But one name, whispered by terrified voices in the slums, would echo through history: Jack the Ripper. But what if Jack wasn't just one man? What if the truth was far stranger, buried under lies, corruption, and secrets that Scotland Yard dared not reveal? Inside the thick smoke of a London pub, two men sat in a shadowy corner, exchanging low words. One was a detective, weary and hollow-eyed. The other, a journalist, whose ink-stained fingers trembled as he spoke. "You've seen the files?" the journalist asked quietly. The detective nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "There's more than they're telling the public," he muttered. "Letters, written in red ink. Some claim to be from the killer himself." The journalist leaned closer. "And you believe they're real?" The detective's eyes darkened. "Real or not, someone wants us afraid. Someone wants us looking in the wrong direction." Outside, the fog thickened. The Thames glistened like black glass beneath the gaslights. A church bell tolled midnight. Somewhere in the distance, a scream broke the silence, short, sharp, and human. By morning, another body was found. Annie Chapman. Her throat slit, her body arranged deliberately, as if the killer was performing some ritual. And there, scratched faintly on a nearby wall, were the words, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." It was written in chalk, hastily, but clearly. Scotland Yard arrived, and panic grew. Was this the work of one madman, or something far larger, involving secret societies, coded messages, and cover-ups? Behind closed doors, in the thick oak rooms of the Metropolitan Police headquarters, senior officers debated what to release to the public. Commissioner Charles Warren insisted that the chalk writing be wiped away before the newspapers could photograph it. He claimed it was to prevent riots, but others whispered that he was hiding something. One officer later confessed in private, "There were too many hands on this case, too many people telling us what not to find." Meanwhile, the people of London lived in fear. Women carried knives, men formed watch groups. Even the shadows seemed dangerous now. Fog clung to the gas lamps like ghosts, and the sound of footsteps behind you could make your heart stop. The Ripper's legend grew, not just as a murderer, but as something supernatural, a demon haunting the East End. But hidden within those stories, deep inside the official documents now locked away for over a century, are details the public was never meant to know. Letters, photographs, and testimony that hint at a web of secrets connecting the victims, the police, and the upper class of Victorian London. Some said the murders were ritualistic, tied to a secret order within the Freemasons. Others claimed they were meant to silence witnesses who had seen too much, women who knew of affairs between royals and commoners, scandals that could destroy the monarchy itself. Whatever the truth was, it was clear. London's underbelly was crawling not only with criminals, but with secrets, and someone, somewhere, was determined to keep those secrets buried. By October, the killings had become a nightmare without end. 5 women dead, a city drowning in fear. Detectives chased hundreds of leads, interrogated dozens of suspects, doctors, butchers, sailors, and even nobles. But the deeper they dug, the darker the truth became. Files went missing, witnesses recanted, and every time the police came close, another murder pulled them further into the fog. The final murder, that of Mary Jane Kelly, was the worst of them all. Her body was found inside her room at Miller's Court, mutilated beyond recognition. The scene was so horrifying that even the most hardened investigators had to turn away. One officer later wrote in his diary, "The room was the devil's work. I pray I never see such a sight again." The investigation reached its breaking point. Scotland Yard was overwhelmed, the newspapers relentless, and the citizens furious. But then, suddenly, it all stopped. Just as quickly as the terror had begun, Jack the Ripper vanished into the fog. But the story didn't end there. Because as years passed and London moved into the new century, strange documents began to surface: letters, confessions, police memos, each revealing a fragment of a deeper conspiracy, a dark network of secrets, corruption, and silence that reached from the slums to the throne itself. A truth too dangerous to tell, and too important to forget. And so began the Dark London Files, a hidden archive of secrets locked away from the public eye. Inside, detectives and historians found clues that suggested something terrifying: that the murders of 1888 were never about random victims. They were messages, coded warnings sent by those who ruled from the shadows. The fog may have lifted long ago, but the questions remain. Who truly killed those women? Why did the police conceal evidence? And what secrets was Victorian London trying to hide beneath its cobblestone streets? The answers still lie buried. But as we turn the next page of these forgotten files, we begin to uncover the truth. One that might change everything we thought we knew about the Ripper and the city that created him. The hidden file. The year was drawing to a cold, damp end. London, drenched in rain and wrapped in mist, was trying to forget. The newspapers had stopped printing the blood-soaked headlines. The crowds had grown tired of fear, and the streets of Whitechapel were quiet again. But deep within the stone corridors of Scotland Yard, one man refused to let the silence settle. Detective Edmund Hale, a name erased from most official records, had seen too much to believe that the case was closed. In his office, lit only by the faint glow of a lantern, Hale sat surrounded by papers, maps, photographs, and witness statements, all stamped with the words "classified, internal use only." He called it his dark file, a private investigation into what truly happened during those dreadful months of 1888. Hale's notes were obsessive, written in tight, angry script. He had drawn lines connecting names, dates, and locations, every victim, every witness, every constable on duty. But what caught his eye most wasn't what was in the file. It was what wasn't. Important evidence had vanished, autopsy reports missing, statements altered, and in several pages of official police records, the names of witnesses had been carefully erased, as if someone had gone through and scrubbed the truth clean. One night, while reviewing the file of Annie Chapman, Hale noticed something strange, a mention of a ring, gold engraved with a strange symbol, found near her body. That note had been crossed out in black ink. No such item was ever recorded again in the official version of the case. He flipped through more pages. The same mark appeared in the report of Catherine Eddowes. A ring, again. Different location, same design. The shape drawn beside it, a triangle with an eye inside, made his blood run cold. It was the Eye of Providence, the ancient symbol of the Freemasons. Hale had heard the rumors before, that the Ripper killings were ritualistic, the work of a secret brotherhood sworn to silence and power. But now, staring at the erased symbol in the file, he felt the weight of something darker. He knew that many of London's most influential men, judges, doctors, even Scotland Yard officials, were Masons. If one of their own had been involved, the system would protect him at any cost. He whispered to himself, what if Jack the Ripper wasn't a man? What if he was a secret? The next evening, Hale received an anonymous letter slipped under his office door. No signature, no address. Just a few words written in elegant cursive. Stop digging. You're looking where light cannot reach. And attached to it, a small brass key. Intrigued and unnerved, Hale followed the only clue he had. The key bore a number, 47, and the crest of the Metropolitan Archives. He rode through the rain to the old archive building, a massive stone structure by the Thames, rarely visited except by historians. Inside, the caretaker eyed him suspiciously, but said nothing as Hale disappeared down the rows of dust-covered files. He found locker 47. It was old, nearly rusted shut. The key fit perfectly. Inside were papers tied with a red ribbon, labeled simply, Whitechapel, Restricted Evidence. The first document was a memo, dated September 1888, signed by Commissioner Charles Warren himself. Under direct instruction, certain evidentiary items related to the Whitechapel cases are to be secured privately. Public release not advised. All external investigation halted. Below the signature was a second mark, an insignia Hale recognized immediately. The same Masonic triangle and eye. It was confirmation. Someone at the highest level had ordered a cover-up. Another file revealed something even more disturbing. It contained a map, hand-drawn, with 5 crosses marked in red ink, the exact locations of the Ripper's victims. But what Hale noticed was the pattern they formed. The crosses aligned perfectly with several key buildings. A Masonic temple, an old hospital once used for royal patients, a government safe house near Whitechapel Road. When connected, they formed a pentagram. Coincidence? Or deliberate design? Hale's hands trembled as he spread the documents across the desk. He realized this wasn't the work of madness. It was ritual. Each murder, each location, carefully chosen. And the message, whatever it was, had been written in blood across London itself. He spent the next weeks in fear. Strange men began to follow him through the fog. He'd see them reflected in puddles or mirrors. Dark coats, black gloves, always silent. Once, while returning home, he found his door slightly ajar. Inside, his papers were untouched, but his lantern had been extinguished. Someone had been there and left him a warning. On his table lay a piece of parchment. On it, drawn in red ink, the same Masonic eye. Desperate, Hale confided in only one person, Amelia Reed, a journalist who had covered the Ripper case for the Star. She was bold, fearless, and tired of being told what not to print. He showed her the files, the map, the erased evidence. At first, she thought it was impossible. Then she saw the commissioner's signature. "Good God," she whispered. "This could destroy half of London's elite." Hale nodded grimly. "Which is exactly why they'll destroy us first." The two decided to make copies of the documents and hide them in different parts of the city. One in the church crypt of St. Dunstan's, another inside an old railway locker, and the last in a safe deposit box under Amelia's name. But before they could publish, tragedy struck. Late one foggy night, Amelia vanished. Her boarding room was found empty, her notes burned in the fireplace. The landlady said 2 men had come to see her earlier, both wearing black coats and top hats, speaking with upper-class accents. Hale searched everywhere, no trace. Only one message, nailed to his door. "The dark files are not yours to tell." Weeks later, Hale was gone too. Some say he resigned. Others whispered he was dismissed, or worse, silenced. The official record lists him as transferred to administrative duties. But there's no proof he ever showed up again. The dark file he kept disappeared from the police archives, erased like it never existed. But in 1892, a janitor cleaning an old Scotland Yard storeroom found something curious wedged behind a drawer, a small leather notebook, half burned, filled with coded notes and sketches. One line, still legible through the smoke stains, read, "The killer was never alone. The murders were messages. The truth lies beneath London." And that notebook, historians now believe, was the last trace of Detective Edmund Hale, the man who uncovered what the world was never meant to see. His files, sealed by order of the Home Office, were labeled highly confidential. Those same papers, decades later, became known among researchers as the Dark London Files, the forbidden archive of secrets connecting the Ripper, the Masons, and the men who ruled from behind velvet curtains. But what was the message? What did those murders truly signify? Why risk exposure, power, and position for blood rituals in the back streets of London? In the next file, one name appears again and again, a name tied to the royal family, to secret societies, and to a truth too dangerous for the Victorians to ever speak aloud. That name would change everything. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. London seemed trapped beneath a curtain of gray, and the city's heart, Whitechapel, beat slower, quieter, as though it too feared what might come next. In a forgotten corner of the British Museum archives, a researcher named Thomas Wren worked under the dim light of an oil lamp. He wasn't a detective, nor a journalist, just a quiet historian fascinated by the secrets of the past. But that night, as he unfolded a collection of dusty letters marked Private Correspondence, 1888, he came across something that made his hands tremble. The letter bore the seal of Buckingham Palace. It was addressed to Dr. William Gull, a respected physician, once the personal doctor of Queen Victoria herself. The handwriting was elegant, the tone commanding. "Dr. Gull, discretion is paramount. The matter must be contained. Certain actions, though regrettable, are necessary to preserve the Crown's dignity. You have our confidence. Proceed as advised. The date, August 1888. The very month the first Whitechapel murder occurred. Wren leaned back, the chair creaking beneath him. Could it be? Was the royal physician somehow involved in the killings? He knew the name well. Gull had been a powerful man, intelligent, ambitious, and deeply tied to the Masonic order. His influence reached every level of society, and according to legend, his loyalty to the crown was absolute. But the letter didn't end there. Attached to it was a smaller note, written in a different hand, almost like a warning. The sin must be buried with her. The witnesses must be silenced. London must forget. The her mentioned in the note, who was she? Wren began to dig deeper. He discovered a separate set of documents stored under the name Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim of the Ripper murders. But these were not ordinary records. They included photographs, personal letters, and a birth certificate, one that didn't make sense. According to the document, Mary Kelly had once been a servant in the household of Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson and second in line to the throne. Rumors had long whispered of the prince's reckless behavior, his secret life among London's underworld, the brothels, the drink, the late-night disappearances. But there was something more. It was said he had fallen in love with a working-class woman, a scandalous relationship that, if exposed, could have destroyed the monarchy. And if Mary Jane Kelly had truly been that woman, then she was more than a victim. She was a threat. Wren's discovery mirrored the theory once whispered among a few brave journalists that the Ripper murders were not random but targeted eliminations. The first women murdered, it was said, were all connected. They had known Mary Kelly. Some had even known the prince. They knew the secret marriage, the hidden child, the royal scandal, and one by one, they were silenced. Dr. Gull, the Queen's physician, was allegedly tasked with ensuring that secret never left Whitechapel. But could a royal doctor truly become a killer? It sounded impossible, until Wren found something even more chilling. In the private collection of Sir Charles Warren, the former police commissioner, there existed a single medical casebook, Gull's Notes from 1888. It had been locked away, never shown to the public. Inside those yellowed pages, written in precise handwriting, were strange entries. The cleansing of the tainted bloodline. The hand of God must correct the sin of man. And below that, sketches of surgical cuts. The exact same cuts found on the Ripper's victims. Wren felt the room grow colder. He looked around nervously. It felt like the walls themselves were watching. He knew he had found something that wasn't meant to survive. The deeper he read, the clearer it became. The murders weren't just random acts of brutality. They were rituals, carefully executed by someone with medical precision and symbolic intent. The organs taken from the bodies weren't trophies. They were offerings. The symbols carved near the crime scenes weren't graffiti. They were warnings. According to Gull's own writings, he believed he was acting as an instrument of divine justice, purging London of its moral decay. His Masonic ties only strengthened that delusion. He saw himself as performing sacred work to protect the crown. But the truth, hidden beneath ritual and secrecy, was simple. He was cleaning up a royal mistake. Wren copied every note, every page, into his own ledger. He had to share it. But the more he prepared to expose it, the more strange events began to happen. The museum's security guard warned him that 2 officials had visited earlier that week, asking about his research. His correspondence began arriving opened. Footsteps followed him home at night, echoing through the damp alleyways. And then, one morning, he arrived at the archive to find the lock on his desk broken, and the letters gone. All that remained was a single piece of parchment on the chair. It read, "You have read too deeply into what was buried." The theft forced Wren into hiding. He left London, traveling north to Yorkshire, where he continued his work in secret. His diary, later found in 1902 after his death, recorded one final discovery before he vanished. He claimed to have located a hidden chamber beneath the old Masonic lodge in Whitechapel. Inside, he found 5 stone pillars, each etched with symbols resembling those cut into the bodies of the Ripper's victims. In the center of the chamber lay an altar, its surface stained dark, and beside it, half buried in the dust, was a silver pendant engraved with the initials W.G. William Gull. Historians still debate whether Wren's account was real or fabricated. The chamber was never officially found, though old blueprints of the lodge show a sealed basement room that was later filled with concrete. But the documents recovered from Wren's diary are real, and they match the erased details in Detective Hale's lost notebook. Both men, decades apart, had uncovered different parts of the same secret: that the Ripper killings were orchestrated to erase evidence of a royal scandal disguised as the work of a madman. And yet, if this theory were true, one question remained. Why let the world believe in the legend of Jack the Ripper at all? The answer, as the next file reveals, lies in a hidden agreement between the Crown and Scotland Yard, an arrangement that sealed the truth forever. A pact of silence, signed in blood. The Pact of Silence. The winter of 1889 came harsh and unrelenting. The city that once trembled at the name Jack the Ripper now whispered it only in drunken murmurs or shadowed corners. Officially, the case had gone cold. Unsolved, the papers declared. But deep beneath the polished surface of Victorian respectability, the real story was far from over. Because London's elite had a secret to bury, one that could never see daylight. And to keep it buried, they made a pact. In an ornate chamber inside Scotland Yard, lit by the flicker of gaslight and the smell of pipe smoke, 6 men gathered around a mahogany table. Among them sat Sir Charles Warren, the commissioner who had led the original Ripper investigation, Dr. Thomas Bond, the surgeon who had performed the autopsies, and 2 members of the Home Office. At the head of the table, beneath the portrait of Queen Victoria herself, sat Lord Salisbury, the Prime Minister. The room was thick with tension. The files on the table were sealed in red wax, each stamped with the insignia of the Crown. "Gentlemen," Lord Salisbury began, his voice low and deliberate, "you're here because you have seen too much, and because you understand what must be done." No one spoke. "The empire stands upon reputation," he continued. "The Queen's name, the stability of our nation, all rest on the illusion of order. If the public were to learn that these killings were born of royal sin," he paused, letting the thought hang like a blade, "then the very foundations of Britain would crumble." The decision was made that night. All official records relating to the Whitechapel murders were to be sealed for 100 years. All evidence linking Dr. William Gull, the Masonic Order, or the royal family was to be destroyed or hidden within the private archives of the Home Office, under the codename Project MR, Murder Requiem. But one man, Detective Edmund Hale, had already vanished with his own private collection of notes, the so-called dark file. The officials agreed that he had been dealt with, though no one dared to ask how. The pact was sealed with signatures, but not ink. Each man dipped his pen into a dark red liquid poured from a vial. Blood. "The Crown must endure," said Lord Salisbury, as the men signed. "The rest is history, or rather, it will never be." Meanwhile, across the city, the truth still flickered like a dying flame. A few journalists, including Amelia Reed's former editor, had tried to reopen the investigation. They were silenced, some by scandal, some by fear, and one by death. The last man who dared to publish a story linking the Ripper to the aristocracy was found drowned in the Thames. The coroner called it suicide. No one believed him. The public, desperate for answers, built their own myth. Jack the Ripper became a ghost, a faceless monster who haunted foggy streets, a nightmare the people could accept, because the truth, that their rulers were capable of bloodshed, was far more terrifying. In the months that followed, Scotland Yard began a quiet purge of evidence. Hundreds of documents were misplaced. Witnesses were re-interviewed, and their statements conveniently changed. But there was one man they could not silence. Inspector Frederick Aberline, one of the original detectives on the case, refused to let it go. He had always doubted the official version, and he had kept a secret of his own. Hidden behind a false wall in his home was a locked trunk, inside of which lay his personal notes from the investigation. Among them, a single page stood out, stained with age, the ink barely visible. It read, "They meet beneath the temple. The doctor, the noble, the priest, and the hand that cleans the blood. This is not madness. This is ceremony." The page was signed only with his initials. F. A. Aberline tried to bring his evidence forward in 1891, but by then he was a broken man, dismissed from duty, and discredited by his superiors. When he spoke, no one listened. He died in 1929, leaving behind only that trunk of papers, discovered by his granddaughter decades later. Those same papers were eventually acquired by the Metropolitan Archives, locked away under the label unverified materials. But historians who have seen the documents describe one final note, written in trembling handwriting. "We buried the truth, but the city remembers. Every whisper in the fog, every shadow in Whitechapel, it remembers." Meanwhile, the royal family distanced themselves completely. Dr. William Gull, declared insane, was placed under private care and died in 1890. The newspapers called it a stroke, but among Masonic circles he was revered as the Silent Guardian, a man who had served the crown in ways the public could never understand. Even after his death, strange stories circulated. Some claimed his journals were hidden beneath the foundations of St. George's Chapel at Windsor. Others said his ashes were mixed into the stones of a new Masonic lodge. Wherever the truth lay, it was clear. The Ripper's trail didn't end with a killer. It ended with an agreement. As years turned to decades, the murders became legend. The name Jack the Ripper transformed from horror to folklore, a ghost story for tourists and penny novels. But the few who had seen the original Dark Files, the forbidden records kept by Hale, Wren, and Aberline, knew better. They spoke of the Pact of Silence, a covenant between the Crown and the law, a deal that ensured the truth would never reach the streets of London. Yet whispers persisted. Every generation, someone stumbled too close. A journalist, a historian, a policeman. Each time the result was the same: missing records, vanished evidence, sudden deaths. It was as if the city itself was defending its own secret. Then, in 1923, an anonymous package arrived at the British Museum. Inside was an old blood-stained letter addressed to the Keeper of Truth. It was unsigned, but the handwriting matched that of Detective Hale's. The letter read, "They thought they could bury the past beneath stone and time. But blood remembers. It seeps through walls, through ink, through silence. And one day, when London sleeps, the fog will rise again, and so will I." Whether it was a confession, a curse, or a warning, no one knows. The letter was quietly filed away, never displayed to the public, but modern historians who have traced it believe that Hale, Wren, and Aberline were all part of a hidden effort, a group of men who risked everything to preserve fragments of the truth. Together, their work formed what we now call the Dark London Files. And those files, when pieced together, reveal that the Ripper killings were never just about murder. They were about control, about erasing the one secret that could bring down an empire. Yet, buried in one of those files lies something stranger still, a final clue that suggests the Ripper killings were only the beginning. Because in 1892, 3 years after the murders ended, another body was found near the Thames, mutilated in the same manner. The police dismissed it as unrelated, but a note pinned to the corpse read, "The pact is broken. The blood must continue." Who wrote it? And what did it mean? That is what the final file reveals. The one Scotland Yard swore never existed. A file labeled only as The Last Ripper, The Shadows of Whitechapel, London, 1890. The winter had returned. Thick fog rolled through Whitechapel's alleys like a living ghost. The street lamps flickered, their glow devoured by the mist. The echo of horse hooves clattered in the distance, mixing with the sound of the River Thames flowing dark and cold. Detective Jonathan Harker stood at the edge of an alley where the cobblestones were still stained with the blood of the city's last unsolved murder. It had been 3 years since the case of the Dark London Files had first landed on his desk, a file filled with names, symbols, and whispers that led nowhere and everywhere all at once. But tonight felt different. Something had shifted in the air. A small envelope arrived earlier that morning, the seal pressed with a crimson wax stamp of an eye within a crown, the same symbol that had haunted every Victorian murder from the beginning. Inside was a single message written in black ink. "The truth walks the fog tonight." Jonathan knew this was it, the endgame. He made his way through the labyrinth of alleyways until he reached an old, forgotten building, the Angels' Rest Asylum, abandoned years ago after a fire. The walls were cracked, the windows shattered, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere deep inside. As he entered, his lantern's glow illuminated rows of rusted iron beds, torn patient files, and walls scrawled with words written in ash. "Forgive us. We are not the monsters. He watches." The deeper he walked, the more the truth unfolded. Behind a false wall in the asylum's basement, he discovered a hidden room, lined with hundreds of case files, photographs, and detailed drawings of every murder victim. And there, sitting in the center of the room, was Dr. Edmund Vale, the brilliant psychiatrist who had vanished years ago. His once white coat was stained, his eyes hollow, and his hands trembling as if haunted by every life he had studied. "You finally found me," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "But I was never hiding. London simply refused to look." Jonathan raised his lantern. "You were behind all of it?" Dr. Vale shook his head. "No. I was the recorder, not the executioner. These murders, they were never random. Each one was an experiment, a test of morality. We believed that by understanding fear and evil, we could cure the sickness within men's minds." Jonathan's heart pounded. "You were experimenting on people?" Vale looked away, his voice cracking. "Not on people, on society." He pulled out a notebook, pages filled with coded entries. The Crown funded it. The Church approved it. The murders were staged to expose London's rot. But somewhere, it became real. The men who were meant to study darkness started enjoying it. Jonathan's lantern flickered. Who were they? Vale's eyes filled with tears. The Order of the Gilded Eye. The same men who built this city's wealth. Judges, scholars, nobles. They thought themselves gods, creating monsters to justify their own sins. He took a deep breath. But one man went further. He killed not for study, but for pleasure. The others tried to stop him. They failed. Jonathan's grip tightened on his revolver. Who was he? Vale's voice broke. You know his name, detective. And in that moment, the realization hit like thunder. The pattern, the symbols, the style. It wasn't just any killer. It was the ghost who haunted London's nightmares. Jack the Ripper. Jonathan took a step back. The room seemed to darken around him. So the Ripper was part of the Order? Vale nodded slowly. He was the Order. He became everything they created. When they disbanded, he continued their work, alone, unseen, uncatchable. The dark London files weren't police reports. They were confessions, each file an attempt to hide what they unleashed. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the corridor. Footsteps. Someone else was here. Jonathan raised his lantern toward the doorway. A figure emerged from the mist, tall, dressed in black, his face hidden beneath a hat and shadow. "You've done well, detective," the voice said, deep and calm. "You followed the trail exactly as planned." Jonathan froze. "Who are you?" The man stepped closer, and the light caught his eyes. Cold, intelligent, unblinking. "I am the last file left to close." The Ripper smiled. "And tonight, London's final secret will be buried." A violent struggle broke out. Lanterns crashed. Fire spread across the walls, lighting the asylum in a demonic glow. Jonathan fired once, twice. The figure moved like a shadow, striking him down. But before the Ripper could finish him, Dr. Vale screamed and threw his lantern at the wall. Flames exploded, cutting the room in half. "Run, Jonathan," Vale shouted. "Let the fire consume what we began." Jonathan stumbled out, coughing through smoke and falling debris. The asylum burned behind him, its windows glowing red like the eyes of the devil himself. From within the flames a voice echoed, haunting, calm, eternal. "You can't kill what's already part of London." Days later, the newspapers wrote of the fire at Angel's Rest. No bodies were found, no trace of Dr. Vale, no sign of the Ripper. The dark London files were sealed, marked classified by order of the Crown. But late at night, when the fog still curls around the city's corners, whispers continue. Some say the Ripper survived. Others believe he became something more, a shadow that walks unseen through the gas-lit streets, forever watching. Detective Harker kept one thing, the crimson wax seal of the eye within the crown. He locked it in his drawer and never spoke of it again. Yet sometimes, when the fog grows thick, he swears he can hear a voice in the mist whisper, "The truth walks the fog tonight."